Okay, I believe we are live to Facebook. Welcome everyone who is joining us. I know people will be joining us gradually, but there are lots of you with us at the moment from around the United States and North America. I know of at least two other countries that are represented. I know of one other continent, so I'm happy for that. And that will be interesting since I think we'll be talking a lot about what's going on in the United States, but similar things are going on elsewhere in the world. My name is Jon M. Sweeney. I'm here representing spiritualityandpractice.com. Thanks for being here. And I am here with Eboo Patel, who you see on screen with me. Eboo is the founder and president of Interfaith America, which was founded as the Interfaith Youth Corps. He's well known to many of you. I'm sure many of you are here only because we are talking with Eboo Patel. Eboo lives in Chicago, works in Chicago, is joining us from his office at Interfaith America. He's written many books, including Acts of Faith and Sacred Ground, two of my favorites. But this new one, We Need to Build, is the one that we're talking about today. And thanks for being here, Eboo.
Thank you, Jon. And I'm gonna preempt you in doing this. Thank you for helping launch me in this work. I think it was 1999. That was the date that your best guess was, that we met at the Religion News Association conference. And I had given, I think I asked a question or maybe given a short presentation. I was on a panel about this new interfaith youth organization that really was just an idea in my head. And you took it seriously enough as the publisher of Skylight Books to say, hey, we don't have enough young voices in the world of spirituality and religious diversity. Let me conceive a book around that and invite you to contribute. So I am ever grateful for that. That wasn't a little thing, that was a big thing. But even little things, when you are forming an idea, little injections of confidence matter so much. And almost a quarter century later, we're the largest interfaith organization in the United States, and we are doing our best to help faith be a bridge of cooperation.
I appreciate that, Eboo. Thank you. Yes, I was thinking about this yesterday because I was doing a little bit of preparing for our conversation, but I also saw your op-ed in the Chicago Tribune yesterday, or I guess they call it a commentary. And I saw what you say in there about a different conference that you appeared at in the mid-90s, not the one where I met you, but you talk about standing up and protesting a little bit, all the white men on stage, the lack of diversity, both in terms of age and racial and religious diversity. And I thought to myself, well, you started schooling me also in about 1999 in the same way.
That's a key story in the book, We Need to Build. And I was initiated into activism. I write about all of this, We Need to Build, but I was initiated into activism by very strident voices, people with kind of an us versus them view of the world and a kind of a tear down the system approach. And looking back, I want to express an appreciation for the shock of that and how it initially interests me in activism. But I spent too long in that mode, and even 3 or 4 years is too long. And basically, what one does in that mode is self-righteously tell other people what they are doing wrong, which is the spirit that I brought to this conference, this United Religions Initiative conference in June of 1998 at Stanford University. And I had gone looking for the ghosts of these great faith-based radical heroes, Bayard Rustin and Dorothy Day and Malcolm X, et cetera. And like a lot of interfaith conferences at the time, it was basically senior theologians talking. And I was 22 or 23, and I was not afraid to stand up and raise my fist and say, this is boring. Where are the young people? Where's the religious diversity? Where's the vanguard energy? And something really powerful happened in that moment, which is a woman named Yolande Trevino approached me, and she said, you have a vision here, an initiative, an interfaith initiative of young people that's genuinely religiously diverse, that orients around social action, that has this kind of powerful energy. You should build that. And that is a powerful moment when you are the kind of the fork in the road. Are you going to continue as a critic telling everybody else what they're doing wrong? Or are you going to take the path of building your own vision? And I've taken the path of building my own vision, and I'm ever grateful to Yolande Trevino and to everybody at that conference for taking me seriously, both in the critique, but even more so in the builder vision.
Well, so continue to tell us what the new book is about. So here it is again, We Need to Build. And I have about 6 questions I'm going to ask you that hopefully will get at the book and give you an opportunity to tell us about the book, because I think that's why people are here today. Some people may be meeting you for the first time, but I'm guessing most people are here to hear what is the vision that you have for the future in 2022. But after I ask my 6 or so questions, I'm going to field you a few questions that I think will be coming in from folks who are joining us via Facebook. And so if you have questions to type in, do that, and we will get to those probably in 25 minutes or so. So the first question is, in the review that I wrote about the book, which was a month or so ago at Spirituality and Practice, I highlighted your chapter called America, the People's Potluck, because I love how you use the potluck as a metaphor. And I want you to explain that. But I also love the story you tell about the quite literal potluck that was part of your early work in interfaith organizing. So would you tell us about that, and in the process, tell us about you?
Yeah, so this is a central metaphor of the book, and it's the way I understand what it means to be a diverse democracy and how to do diversity work. And of course, diversity work is, it's on the front pages of newspapers and top of mind these days, everywhere from college campuses to Fortune 100 companies, right? And so my metaphor for a diverse democracy is a potluck. And what characterizes a potluck is that it welcomes the contributions of a diverse array of people. You don't want a homogenous population, because then everybody will bring the same dish. And however much you might like casserole or biryani, you don't want 20 versions of it, right? You want people to bring, you want casseroles and biryani, you want hummus and falafel, you want mansaf, and you want roti. You want this kind of wide diversity of dishes, right? And so a potluck doesn't exclude people, it includes people, and it includes a diverse array of people. The second thing is, when you get invited to a potluck, you don't tell all the stories of why you can't bring your dish, right? And a big focus of diversity work these days is people telling the stories of the things that are worst in their lives, so the hardest parts. That's real, right? And we can't only focus on the worst parts of our nation or the worst parts of our experience. We have to look at identity as an asset, as a contribution. And so when you get invited to a potluck, it's natural to say, I'm really proud of my grandmother's, recipe for this particular dish. I'm really proud of the feast food of my culture on this particular day, and I'm going to bring that. And so often it is connected to a religious identity. The other things I love about a potluck is the creative combinations that emerge, right? So you have unlikely friendships. Somebody brings this awesome crusty bread, and somebody else brings this wonderful spicy dip. And who knew that those two things were going to magically show up? But they do, and you've never tried them together, but this is the first time, and it's awesome, right? I also love the fact that people at a potluck generally take care of the common space. They know that a potluck has to have clean dishes, and it has to have, clean rooms, et cetera, et cetera. People stay afterwards to clean up. People come early to help prepare. And I love that kind of commitment to the commons. And the final thing I'll say about a potluck as a metaphor for a diverse democracy is that no mayor, no general, no president requires you to potluck. People do it themselves. It's the ultimate civic form. And you can think of a million ways a potluck goes wrong, right? But the truth is, it almost never does. And I, spent the year after graduating from college organizing potlucks out of my little apartment on the edge of Lincoln Park in Chicago. And 50, 60 people would show up at this little two-bedroom apartment, and people from all over the city and all walks of life bringing these wonderful dishes and making a clean, safe space for everybody. And then when that led into the founding of an intentional community in 1997, a community called Stone Soup, we had Tuesday night potlucks that had hundreds of people. So I speak from experience here, but I also love how the experience works its way into metaphor.
That's marvelous. So now another chapter in the book takes us to another area of our collective lives, and one that's much less pleasant. But you call the chapter The Obama Story, the Trump Story. And I don't want to get too political, because everyone will start to log off, because we can only take so much. these days. But you tell a story that is especially meaningful right now about when President Obama went to the University of Notre Dame. Can you tell that story and
Yes. Yeah, John, you're such a close reader of the book. I just appreciate that so much. So, the way that chapter is framed, it's not a hugely political chapter. It's even though it is a political title, the way the chapter is framed is to underscore how important narrative is in the shaping of a nation. And so I think it's Walter Lippmann, I quote, he says that the stories that are told will determine at any time what people will do, right? And Alistair McIntyre's famous line, I don't know who I am or what I should do until I know the story or stories that I am a part of. And in so many ways, the United States is not just a political entity, it's not just a geography, it's a story. It is a story that we tell, and it's particularly important to tell a story when you have a diverse nation that is not based in race or ethnicity or religion. Germany, England, France, these are all nations based in ethnicity. In the United States, we're a highly diverse population. There's no ethnic American. We have to tell a story about who we are. And I basically think Barack Obama told an enormously hopeful, almost sacred story about who we are. And a huge part of how he did it was to communicate how we should engage with people that we disagree with. So at the University of Notre Dame, the year after he gets elected president is kind of a signature moment. I think Notre Dame has a tradition of hosting a president as a commencement speaker in the early years of that individual's presidency. And so Obama goes, and there's this huge controversy, like, the top story in the news about all these pro-life protesters, hundreds and hundreds of people who have flown in from all over the country and the world to protest Obama coming to South Bend. And he gets up on stage at this commencement and he gives this talk about how much he admires pro-life protesters, how much he admires the pro-life position. And he has an actual story. He says that during his Senate campaign, he got a call from an individual who said, listen, I understand we disagree on abortion, I'm pro-life and you're pro-choice, but you have caricatured my position on your website and that's unfair. And Obama takes that language off of his website, instructs his communications person to not do that again, communicates with this individual, tells him how much he appreciates his position, and then says that so much of his own life has been shaped by pro-life people, particularly Catholic sisters in community organizing. And so I just love this. I love the hopeful story Barack Obama told about how we are all Americans, how we all contribute to the potluck, and how he tells a story of how we ought to engage principled people with whom we disagree with. There are limits to that, right? Like, I'm not buying a brownie from the KKK bake sale. I'm not telling a positive story about the KKK, but about somebody with whom I have a principled disagreement on an issue in which multiple sides are justified, or at least have a story. I think that is what is required in a diverse democracy. And John, I would say a huge part of what my book is about is how religion, spirituality, the sacred animates a diverse democracy, and what it means to live in a diverse democracy with the recognition that diversity is not just the differences you like, and that part of what we have to learn how to do is to disagree on some fundamental things while working together on other fundamental things.
Yeah. Thank you. So the book is We Need to Build, which is a great title, and a title that, makes the reader realize that you're getting down to business. I mean, this is not interfaith organizing where we sit around and tell each other our stories and then we go home. We need to build. So my specific question is, what's the part for government to do? What's the part for people to do? What's the part for congregations to do in this building?
So I'll answer the question in this way. So there's I don't talk a huge amount about government in this book, although I think the government has a very, very important role in a society. I went to public schools. My kids go to public schools. That's just one example of what the government provides. But if you think about the definition of a democracy as being how people participate in public life, our civic actions matter a whole lot, and religious communities, religious practice, religious traditions have contributed a massive amount. And so one of the exercises I invite people to do in this book is to imagine if all of the institutions founded by religious communities disappeared overnight in your city. And let's take a walk around your city and see what would be gone. So obviously the congregations would be gone, which is sad for the people who worship on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays. But it's also sad for the people who rely on that congregation's soup kitchen and that congregation's basement for their AA group. Those are hugely important civic activities. My wife's, when my wife was in law school in Chicago, she tutored at Fourth Presbyterian Church. She wanted to do service, and that was the institution that did service. By the way, it's not just congregations that are gone. It's also a lot of preschools, a lot of hospitals, a lot of universities. Here in Chicago, Rush Presbyterian Hospital, Northwestern University Hospital, founded by religious communities. Those would be gone. The Inner City Muslim Action Network, gone. And so I really want to emphasize really what your group emphasizes, John, with the importance of religion, spirituality, and practice in a diverse democracy through very concrete things like institutions. And also I highlight just the way religious traditions do social change. There's this kind of stereotype of the lone prophet on the high mountain with the long beard wagging a finger at people, telling them what they're doing wrong, right? And that's the prophetic voice. But really, if you look at what religious traditions do, is they articulate an ideal, the kingdom of God, so to speak, and then they build institutions that model that ideal and that seek to move the world closer to it. And I admire that a great deal, right? My dad went to the University of Notre Dame. My mom went to St. Anne's in Bombay. If it wasn't for religious institutions, I grew up at the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association. If it wasn't for religious institutions, my life wouldn't be nearly the same. And my guess is that's the same for everybody on this call. If you think about, how much time you might have spent at the YMCA or at a summer camp started by Methodists or Presbyterians, or maybe you learned how to swim at the Jewish Community Center. These are powerful, and they're sacred, and they are an essential part of our democracy.
Yeah. All right. Now I want to talk about pluralism and democracy, those two words. They're words, the pluralism isn't a word that most people use very often, and I'm not sure if most people understand it. And I'm quite sure that most people don't value it the way you do. You say in the book, real democracy is to embrace and encourage religious diversity and pluralism. So explain what that means. And the question is that where we begin? Does it have to begin with us agreeing on that?
So it's a great, do we have to agree on that? I write a lot about John Courtney Murray, the great Jesuit philosopher in this book. He's one of the great thinkers on pluralism. And one of the things that he points out is what a civilization is people living and talking together. And it's that conversation that defines a civilization. And the person known as the barbarian, right? The person who is anti-civilization, what that person does is destroy the conversation, right? And so when we live and talk together, we are part of civilization. And when people from diverse identities and backgrounds live and talk together, we are creating a pluralist civilization. And John Courtney Murray highlights just how unique that is in world history. For most of human history, people have lived in relatively homogeneous communities, basically living and talking with people much like themselves, racially, ethnically, and religiously. In fact, Michael Walzer points out in his great book, What It Means to Be an American, that for centuries, people thought a democracy required homogeneity. So what we are doing in creating a diverse democracy, especially a religiously diverse democracy, is new in history, and we should recognize that. We should cherish it. It's precious, right? It's also holy. I write about in We Need to Build the beautiful story, The Conference of the Birds, written by Farida bin Attar, who's a medieval Sufi poet, who writes about gathering this group of birds together, this diverse group of birds, convinces them all to go on this long, arduous journey to see their god, who's known as the Simurgh. And, they go through across 7 mountains and valleys, and it's windy and cold, and it snows and it rains, et cetera, et cetera. They finally arrive, and they're so relieved. They're waiting to do darshan, witnessing with their God. And the gates of the palace open, and in front of them is a shimmering mirror where they see their own image. And the lesson of the story for me is that a diverse community who has gone on a journey together, all these diverse birds, right, from doves to eagles, that is sacred, that is holy. And I think that that's what we're doing in diverse democracy, right? That's what pluralism is. John Courtney Murray says that that pluralism is the ability to hold diverse identities and divergent ideologies together in a political and civic community, right? We have to be committed to the underlying structure that brings together those diverse identities and divergent ideologies. We have kind of a bumper sticker way of saying this at Interfaith America. Potluck Nation is our metaphor for it, and the bumper sticker way of saying it is respect, relate, cooperate. Respect, relate, cooperate. That's the essential ingredient for a diverse democracy. You respect people's identities, you build relationships across groups, and you cooperate to serve the common good.
Yeah. Now, what do you say to religious people? You must get this question sometimes. What do you say to religious people who feel that their commitment to their religious tradition or faith is significantly more important to them than is a commitment to pluralism and democracy?
So I take that very seriously. I think that's hugely important. I absolutely respect people's deep and their deep faith commitments, and it being their first commitment. I would say the question is, does that faith commitment is that faith commitment about a bridge of cooperation, or is it about a barrier of division, or is it about a bludgeon of domination? I think people's faith commitments ought to be first. The question is, how does that express itself in relationships? So let me give you one of my favorite examples of this. So Martin Luther King Jr., his first commitment was to his faith. And he said in this beautiful line, many people want to make of me many things, but in the deep recesses of my heart, I am a Baptist minister. My daddy was a Baptist minister. My granddaddy was a Baptist minister. My commitment to Jesus as the Son of the living God is the highest commitment that I have. Right? That's King. Now, how does that faith commitment express itself? It expresses itself in a vision of a democracy in which everybody is equal and has positive relationships. It expresses itself in beloved community, right? Faith commitment is first. How does it express itself? It expresses itself as a bridge of cooperation. So we call this in our materials at Interfaith America, having a theology of interfaith cooperation, going deep in your own Islamic or Jewish or Catholic or Methodist tradition and asking the question, how does my religion call me to relate positively to other people? And there's a million examples of this. There's, Mahatma Gandhi, who nobody would call anything but a principled Hindu, and his friendship with Badshah Khan, right, the great Afghan Muslim leader. There's St. Francis of Assisi during the Crusades, traveling from Italy to Egypt to meet with Sultan Malik al-Kamil, right? It was his Catholic faith that called him to build that relationship. So, and I think that is actually essential to a democracy. And I actually think the European founders of the United States recognized that, which is why they established the structures of a religiously diverse democracy. They believe that not only does religion cultivate virtue in individuals, but it also leads to positive cooperation and relationships, which was a new idea, at least in Western history, right? These are individuals coming out of the European wars of religion, right? Decades and decades of bloody, ugly fighting. And they believe that faith can be a bridge of cooperation, not a barrier of division. That's pretty remarkable. We inherit that legacy, and I think it's our job to write the next great chapter in the history of American religion. And one of the things I say in We Need to Build is we're currently in the chapter Judeo-Christian. That phrase was not given to us by Moses on Sinai. It was not given to us by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. It was invented in the 1930s, not as a theological concept, not as a historical concept, but as a way to include Catholics and Jews into the American experiment. We're far more diverse in 2022 than we were in 1932. It's time for the next chapter in American religious history, and we think that chapter is called Interfaith America.
Well, you anticipated what was going to be my last question, which was to ask you about that phrase, Judeo-Christian. I was very interested in that portion of the book in particular because, as you know, I've been involved in interfaith work myself for a long time, but most of all in the Jewish-Christian dialogue side of it, and most specifically in the Jewish Catholic side most recently. And a lot of folks object to Judeo-Christian itself. I mean, that phrase itself is not the best way to express anything in the past, let alone anything in the future. But I like the fact that you are pointing out that it isn't helpful at all in 2022 or in the future.
Well, one of the things I do in the book is I highlight that so many of these things that we disparage now, melting pot, Judeo-Christian, they were steps forward in their time. And what can human beings do but take a step forward in their time? And so I think the particular story of Judeo-Christian is very interesting. So in the 1920s is an ugly time for minorities in the United States. It's an ugly time for African Americans. There's all kinds of lynchings. It's terrible. There's anti-Catholicism. There's anti-Semitism. And part of what happens in the late 1920s is a group of inclusive clergy, Protestant ministers, Catholic priests, Jewish rabbis gather together, and they form an organization called the National Conference on Christians and Jews. And they start running interfaith activities, the kind of things that you and I have been involved in for a long time, right, John? They send trialogue, they send tri-faith presentations all around the country. They establish trialogues in different communities, trialogue being Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. And they're running all of these activities, but they know that they have to change the American imagination. And the American imagination at the time is so deeply rooted in being a Protestant nation that Franklin Roosevelt, that great liberal lion, actually says, we're a Protestant nation, the Jews and Catholics are here under sufferance. And what the NCCJ does is something that very few nonprofit organizations have a chance to do. It's actually what Interfaith America's goal is in the 21st century. They shift the paradigm. They invent a term, right? They literally invent it. It's a civic invention. They make it up. And the term is Judeo-Christian. And the purpose of that is to move away from a Protestant nation paradigm to one that more civically includes Jews and Catholics. And so, when people disparage Judeo-Christian, I point out, would you rather have been a Jew or a Catholic in America in 1940 or in 1990, right? Yep. Judeo-Christian has done good work. We should appreciate the legacy of the NCCJ. And now it's time for us to do our work, right? It's our leg of the race. The pen is in our hands. We need to author the next chapter. I think that chapter is called Interfaith.
Well, so I should pause and say, this is Eboo Patel talking about his new book, We Need to Build. You're at spiritualityandpractice.com's Facebook live feed. Thanks for being here with us. If you have questions, anyone who is watching, you may type them in and I will hopefully see them and ask them on your behalf. Eboo, so you were talking earlier about religious traditions are supposed to lead us to positive cooperation and relationships in the world. So I think all of us know that there are religious traditions today, as there always have been, that don't lead people, unfortunately, to positive cooperation and relationships in the world. So my question is, I guess, does Interfaith America try to reach those people, try to reach those traditions? Is there some way to teach? And, I have a neighbor, I have a relative who's in this camp. I mean, what do you advise people to do, and what does Interfaith America do?
So I would say every religious tradition has a theology of interfaith cooperation. The question is, does the adherent or believer make it salient, right? So I don't think it's religious traditions. It's not Islam or Christianity or Sunni Islam or evangelical Christianity that inherently and theologically puts up a barrier. It's particular interpretations, right?
Absolutely, I should have put it that way.
We are, and you know this about me, John, we are quite proactive about engaging more conservative or evangelical elements of religious tradition. So I have a great relationship with Phil Ryken at Wheaton College. I just interviewed Shirley Hoekstra for the Interfaith America podcast. She's the president of the Consortium of Christian Colleges and Universities, which is the more evangelical colleges in the United States, of which there are 120 plus. Places like Wheaton and Bethel and Calvin and Pepperdine and Baylor. So we don't want to be just a tribe of theological and political liberals. There's a lot of interfaith work that's like that. It's fine. I don't want to, my goal is not to disparage that. It's just to say, we really believe in what I write about in the book as the American civic, which is that place that, as John Courtney Murray said, that people from diverse identities and divergent ideologies are able to cooperate on common projects together. Habitat for Humanity, Little League, community theaters, 4-H. I mean, we think that this is the stuff of American life, and we need to strengthen and build it.
That's great. Now, back to pluralism and democracy. Some of us aren't fans of American flags in houses of worship. Just to sort of get it down to a practical level, what is an American flag standing in a mosque or in a synagogue or in a church? What does that mean? Does that have a place, do you think? Does it have even a stronger place in the vision that you have for pluralism and democracy?
It's a great question. So there's an American flag standing in our offices at Interfaith America. It's important to me to be there. I like American flags at houses of worship, actually, and this is about interpretation. If people are saying, my faith calls on me to strengthen the nation, this is the community that I'm a part of, it's the common good that I'm a part of, I am called on to strengthen the nation. Imam Warathdin Muhammad, excuse me, famously holds up both the Quran and the flag in the 1970s, and as he's leading a group of African-American Muslims kind of out of the Nation of Islam into a more traditional Sunni Islam, and he says, this is what we're about. We're about the Quran and the flag, and they're connected. And so, I want to find resonances and common ground between nations and religions. I want it to be mutually enriching. I don't want it to be a toxic combination of Christian or Muslim nationalism. That's clearly bad. I love the idea that what an American flag in a mosque represents to me is, as a Muslim, I'm not just for Muslims, I'm for all Americans. And I'm going to participate in the democracy. I'm going to strengthen the democracy. My faith and my faith community are contributors.
That's great. Thank you. Now, I've got a bunch of questions coming in from Facebook, so I want to make sure I turn to them. And I did tell Eboo that he could go at about 10 minutes to the hour, but we've got about 15 minutes left. So,
John, I'm going to just take a quick 2 seconds. I'm going to throw a cough drop in. I've had a sore throat for a minute. So you look through the questions and maybe have a back and forth with the audience a bit. I'll be back in 90 seconds or so.
Got it. So thanks for joining us, everyone. You are at Spirituality and Practice, our Facebook page. We're talking with Eboo Patel, the author of We Need to Build. If you are not familiar with Eboo, you need to look him up. His role on the Faith Council in the Obama White House is part of his background, but most importantly, he's the author of some significant books, including Acts of Faith and Sacred Ground. He's an American Muslim, but he's also the founder of Interfaith America, which is the largest organization engaging in religious activity in the United States. It was originally founded under the name Interfaith Youth Corps. It has recently been renamed Interfaith America, and that is part of Eboo's vision for the future, and that's part of what he describes in this new book, We Need to Build. So I see we have questions from Dave, Terry, and others. Thank you, Eboo. You're back.
John, just a quick clarification, and I'm sorry, I got coughed up in my mouth, and some more liquid here. I've had a sore throat for a minute, unfortunately. We're not the largest organization engaging in religious activity. There's, the Southern Baptist Convention and all those. We're the largest organization engaged in positively and positively engaging religious diversity, which is what I know you meant to say.
Yes. All right, so Dave asks, can you comment on the way in our politically polarized culture We often have people of different faith traditions agreeing more about the common good than they do with many from their own tradition.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Robert Putnam and David Campbell point this out in their terrific book, American Grace, where they say that we no longer have, American life is no longer characterized by doctrinal disputes between religious communities. Those exist, but they're not the most salient polarization or dispute in our common life. Instead, you've got you've got people from different religious groups orienting around different political poles. And so you'll have maybe Orthodox Jews and conservative Catholics and evangelical Protestants who are basically building an interfaith pro-life movement, or an interfaith, kind of make up the religious diversity in the Republican Party. And you've got the same Reformed Jews, liberal Protestants, more liberal Muslims and Catholics, secular humanists doing the same on the left. People have their own politics. That's perfectly fine. I certainly have my own politics. I think that what we need to emphasize right now is our civic life together. We can't let political differences wreck summer camp or Little League or community theater or 4-H. We have to, the only way to have a diverse democracy is to be able to disagree on some fundamental things and work together on others. And I actually think working together with people with whom you disagree is holy, it's sacred.
Yeah, good. All right. Terry asks, I'm working with diversity, equity, inclusion leaders at private schools to elevate the conversation of spirituality, religion, and belief systems with our young people. What are your thoughts, Eboo, about getting this conversation started in public schools? A tough nut to crack, I realize. Dr. Lisa Miller writes in The Awakened Brain that we're hardwired for spirituality from birth. We need to help awaken, nurture, and support that part of the brain for all our young people and all people. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's really powerful. David Brooks says, whatever you think about religion, everybody has a soul, that they have this deep, ineffable part of themselves that requires to be recognized. And I think it's absolutely part of kind of a whole child education to pay some attention to that, to pay attention to that spirituality, that soul. In addition to that, I would say that in addition to spirituality, just like straight up religious traditions and communities are an essential thing to teach. Again, how do you understand American civic life without attention to the role of religious communities? Well, there are something like 350,000 congregations in the United States, and 120,000 of them have I think the number is 120,000 have some sort of employment program. That's remarkable. Right? Tens of thousands have some sort of AIDS, HIV ministry. Work in America doesn't get done without the participation of religious communities. I'll give you a perfect example of this. Refugee resettlement. 6 of the 9 major refugee resettlement agencies in the United States were founded by faith communities. And in fact, it's those faith communities that lobbied the US government for a refugee resettlement policy to begin with after World War II. Refugees do not get resettled in the United States without the work of those based organizations.
Yeah. All right. Tom asks, Eboo, to what extent does your organization include atheists in its activities? And does it seem to an atheist that they have to see themselves as a religion?
That's a great question. So atheists are very included. I would say, on the staff of upwards of 50 people, 20% of people would describe themselves as atheist or maybe agnostic. We often say faith and philosophical viewpoint or faith and philosophical community. So an atheist doesn't have to see him or herself as a religion. For our programs, you have to appreciate what religious communities do in the United States, which I think you can do. If Muslims can appreciate Buddhists, atheists can appreciate religion. And religious people should welcome atheists to the table. That's a viewpoint, and that's an identity that matters. And a potluck welcomes everybody within reason, right? So atheists are very welcome. They show up at our programs, they're on our staff, and they view themselves as a philosophical identity community.
Monik, says or asks, why are non-Abrahamic faiths, do you think, given less priority and often excluded from panel discussions in interfaith conversations?
So I think it's because, interfaith work in the United States starts with Jews and Christians, as Jon says, which makes perfect sense because those are the communities with the largest numbers and certainly the most organized communities in most of American history. And I think that a lot of people at this point, they just don't know a Buddhist or a Jain or a Muslim or a Hindu to invite to a panel. And so part of this is more Muslims and Jains and Buddhists and Hindus being a part of kind of civic representation, so to speak. We do well in so many other ways. We also need to grow the kind of people who can sit on a panel, and then people who organize interfaith work need to expand and extend their communities.
Yeah. Lisa wants you to comment on the Supreme Court decision about prayer in schools from an Interfaith America perspective.
I assume this is the Supreme Court decision where the football coach at Washington State was kneeling on the 50-yard line. So, I was quoted in the Washington Post about this recently in an article, a very good article by Michelle Borstein. And I highlighted, look, this could be coercive. It absolutely could, right? My kids play sports. They want to please their coaches. If their coach was like leading a Christian prayer, I could absolutely see my Muslim kids feeling like they needed to participate. But I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it has to be coercive. I think depending on the community, it could crack open the gates of religious diversity. So you have an evangelical Christian football coach kneeling at the 50-yard line, and there's a group of people praying around him. You have a group of Muslims doing salat in an end zone. You have a group of Buddhists chanting. You have a group of Hindus doing arti. I mean, that's what I told Michelle. She didn't quote me on this, but my image of America is a football field after a game with all kinds of religious communities engaging in their practices, and then they get together and go do a service project together. That's interfaith America.
Eboo, Kim wants to challenge your potluck metaphor and reality. She says, how can we address some of the often unnoticed inequalities that can be exacerbated through potlucks? Food preparation is costly in terms of time and often money. Often women are the ones who are doing all of the work, pressured to invest time and resources getting ready for the potluck, while men are excused and given more freedom to invest their time in building their energy and working toward life improvements, including social networking.
Well, as somebody who hosted a potluck for 2 years that went from 6 people to like 300 people at the intentional community that I was at, I can tell you that in my experience, women and men have played the same role. And my limited, narrow personal experience, women and men play the exact same role. Plenty of midnights. I was scrubbing on the counters with 6 hippie men at the Stone Soup Cooperative. Listen, potlucks mostly work, and I think that that's remarkable because, as I said before, there are a million ways they could go wrong, but they rarely do. I mean, I've probably been to hundreds, right? People don't bring their worst dish to a potluck. In fact, Daniel Allen, the great African-American female political theorist at Harvard, who has written some of the most important books of political theory in the early 21st century, she puts it plainly. She's like, people bring their best dish to a potluck, right? Everybody can contribute. Everybody can contribute. And I think that we do a real disservice to the human spirit when we assume that somebody cannot contribute.
Habib wants to know if you have any comment about Indigenous people in Canada and the upcoming visit of the Pope in light of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report.
So I haven't been following that closely, in part because I had COVID and I'm still having some lingering effects here, including a sore throat. And so, I mean, I do know that the Pope has recognized the role that Catholic schools played in really damaging Indigenous identity and Indigenous lives in Canada and probably elsewhere also. I think that was courageous and important for the Pope to do. And the only thing, that kind of general thing I would say on this topic, as I said, I haven't specifically followed the Pope's visit, but I hope that he continues on that path. And my sense is that he will.
Eboo, I would say at this point, why don't you leave us? We're going to let you rest your throat. We're here with Eboo Patel. We Need to Build, author of We Need to Build from Beacon Press, who I know has been Eboo's faithful publisher for a very long time. Go buy the book, use the book. Eboo, leave us with a final word. What do you want this book to do in the world?
First of all, John, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the best review of the book thus far. And I don't mean in terms of glowiness. I just mean in terms of careful reading. I want to thank you for helping me start on this journey. I want to thank you for your leadership on this journey and your book. So a huge thank you to you. A huge thank you to Spirituality and Practice and everybody who came today. So, this book is about the holiness of a diverse democracy. This book is about the holiness and sacredness of engaging with people that you don't always agree with. It's also about social change. And I'll leave you with the kind of key lines on social change. I say the goal of social change is not a more ferocious revolution. The goal of social change is a more beautiful social order. We need to defeat the things we do not love by building the things we do. And I think religious traditions model a way for doing that. So thank you to the community. Thank you, John. Thank you to the audience.
Marvelous, marvelous.
And please do buy the book.
Thank you, Eboo. Thank you, Eboo Patel. Thanks for being with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and those great questions. Goodbye.